Good evening, my name is Thomas Hurst and welcome to Kirklees Public Eye's Party Leaders Debate. With all the focus being put on what happens before the election, we decided to undertake a post-election debate to see what will now happen in the aftermath of the elections across Kirklees. The politicians made promises, they got elected on those promises. Now our aim is to see how those promises will be rolled out and how the key issues facing Kirklees will now be tackled in the next few years. Introducing our guest tonight, first of all from the Labour Party, Councillor David Sheard.
Evening.
From the Green Party, Councillor Andrew Cooper.
Hello.
From the Liberal Democrats, Councillor Kath Pinnock.
Hi.
And from the Conservatives, Councillor Robert Light. Welcome to you all. Pleasure to have you here. Now, on to our first question. Split Kirklees into four is one suggestion as to how the borough should move forward. It has been suggested there should be a core service covering social services, adult services, children's safeguarding, waste collection, strategic highways and the council's corporate function plus 4 districts, Dewsbury and Batley, Greater Spenborough, Huddersfield Urban and Huddersfield Rural, that will manage all other council services from parks and public buildings to public toilets and planning enforcement. Is this necessary to ensure localism is rolled out properly, or are we losing a well-functioning, centralised system that operates adequately in its current form? Councillor David Sheard. What's your view?
Well, as you know, Tom, that this is a suggestion that I made earlier before the election campaign started, and it's a suggestion made under the peer review that the outside body looked at the Kirklees and said it's essential we do this sort of thing. The frightening thing is at this time, it's not the best time to be doing it because what the people devolving are doing will be making cuts.
Sure. Councillor Cooper?
I guess the answer to this question is what we really don't want is a lot of glorified area committees where it's simply devolving directly down to a split version of Kirklees. The real question here is how we're going to devolve to communities, how we're going to be working directly with communities on the priorities that they have, not necessarily the priorities that a small group of councillors are doing. So my question would be is how are we going to ensure that we really have got the engagement with the communities, which means that there will be more buy-in from those communities. If we're not doing that, then it's pointless. The issue about cuts, of course, is important because if you're devolving issues, as David says, if you're devolving funding, you're also devolving cuts in funding. And that means that responsibility goes down to other bodies as well. I can see there's opportunities for division here, there's opportunities for more strife, and it's really how the parties approach this that's important. Sure. The spirit to which it's approached. Do we want 4 councils effectively fighting each other? Not real councils, of course, because the government wouldn't allow us to do that. But we will see what emerges out of the process.
So if I understand you correctly, you're saying that with the cuts that are about to happen, such a devolution, this particular suggestion, would not be able to take place adequately, given the current problems at the current time.
No, what I'm saying is that there will be more control over less money.
Right.
It's as simple as that. More control over less money is not necessarily an easy place to be in, you know.
Councillor Pinnock, do you agree with this particular statement? If not, what are your objections?
Oh, Liberal Democrats have always agreed and proposed indeed over the years that decisions about local council services ought to be taken by local communities. So we totally support the idea of devolution. The issue I have with the proposal to split it into 4 is that that's just been done by drawing lines on a map. It's not been done by discussing that with local communities. You know, how do they want any devolution to be implemented, and what does it mean for them? So that's my first thing. I think you need to start with people, talking to them. And then the second thing is in my experience, people will get involved in making decisions when there is some flexibility with funding.
Yeah.
So they have an options and choices about where the money should be spent. But as you've already heard, that option ain't going to be there. It's going to be how do you do the same, do less, because we've got a lot less funding available. And I think it could be seen by communities as being quite a cynical way of forcing them to make decisions locally on the cuts, rather than them being taken at Kirklees level.
Okay. Councillor Light, what's your view on this proposal?
Well, Kirklees has been around for 40 years, using broadly the same ways of doing things for those 40 years. And we as Conservatives think it's time we had a completely different approach, which instead of being run by a Huddersfield-centric organisation, is run by the communities that make up the borough. And to me that is a fundamental shift in the way the council has operated in those previous 40 years. And I think it's right at this time that we are looking at how best to shape Kirklees for the future. Yeah, there's some tough decisions, there's less money, we accept all that, and those are going to have to be dealt with in a rational and open way. But there's a real big opportunity here for real devolution. Not about just glorified area committees, but actually giving power back to communities. And that is, the opportunity there relies on one thing to make that happen. It relies on the centre to let go and actually trust the communities to get it right for their area. And that is hard, I accept, for politicians who are used to sort of controlling things, but I think it's fundamental for the future that actually Batley and Dewsbury will be able to shape more of its future in Batley and Dewsbury. And equally, the other parts of the borough will be able to do that. And I think the challenge really is how do we ensure that we get maximum devolution so that there is maximum opportunity for choices to be made at a local level.
So, really what you're saying is, I mean, Councillor Pinnock talks about engaging with communities before such a process takes place. Are you saying that the actual devolution itself is a way of re-engaging certain communities across Kirklees?
Yes, I think I am, because it's a process. It's not a case of start here and finish there. It's you put the proposals on the table, you engage and discuss with communities how best to make them work. And I wouldn't want to see four areas, districts, or whatever you're going to call them, functioning all the same way, because they're all different, they're all unique, and I would want them to work differently, because that's how you get the best for those areas.
Okay, can I just come back up?
Of course you can.
I guess the issue here is if we are going to have a long period of listening and suggestions from communities. This sounds very much to me like it's time to talk budget process, and you look at that and you think how many people were engaged, how many people were, if you like, the usual suspects, and how much real change will result from that. I think what's actually needed is demonstration from councillors as to how they're going to realistically engage with their communities. I think that's the thing that's key here. The other thing I'd like to mention is the Huddersfield-centric issue. I'm sitting here with 3 councillors who are not from the Huddersfield area, who have all led Kirklees councils. I think in many ways, it's a bit of a bogus argument. It's a good thing to stick on leaflets. It's a good thing to sort of say when you're out there, if that's what you wanted to do. But none of you 3 have come from Huddersfield. It's only me who comes from Huddersfield, and I've never ran the council. So, let's get real.
Anybody want to come back on that?
Yeah, go on.
All of you then.
I just want to welcome Robert's conversion to localism. I mean, it's just a pity that Robert was never elected, and when the number of times he tried to be an MP, then we might not have Mr Pickles trying to micromanage local authorities from central London. We might have a government that recognise that local government has a function to play. I agree with what part of what Robert said. There's been the whole point of, if you're devolving things, the whole point of politics is you've got to give people the right to make mistakes. You've got to get people to make the wrong ideas. Otherwise, there's no point in it. So that you can't tell everybody you can make any decision you want as long as I agree with it. Absolutely. You've got to let them get on with it and make the mistakes. We'll tell them they've made the mistakes. We'll make sure the public know they've made the mistakes. But that's part of devolution. So I think, and on Kath's point, yes, it would be nice if we had the time, Kath, but as you know, by next November, we have got to come up with a budget that more or less says that in 2 years' time, we have another 40 million on top of the 80 million we've already cut to cut out of services. Sure. My view is strongly as a politician, that yes, if you really believe in wanting to protect the people that you're wanting to protect, the time to be a politician is when cuts are being made, not when there's money slashing around. because it's much more important that we're there to protect the people who can't protect themselves when there's less and less money.
Okay.
Yeah, one of the things I think we've got to, all of us would probably agree on, is that central government has always, for whatever party, taken more power away from local government, more power away and decision making from local government to itself. And for me, one of the absolutely critical issues is that central government needs to let go of local decision making. You know, as David has said about Pickles and his, you know, you've got to have a bin emptied every week. Actually, that's a decision that should be made locally. And about parking issues, actually, that's a decision that should be made locally. So if they've got so much time to waste thinking about parking and bin collections, perhaps we don't need so many MPs.
Shame we didn't support the reduction measures for MPs in Parliament.
Poor old Robert, never mind. So that the critical issue to me is that, and then it is about, you know, we've got to have a proper democratic element to any decisions about local services which affect everybody, because otherwise we'll have the loudest and strongest voices determining how services are delivered locally.
Okay,
And
Councillor.
they won't be accountable either unless they're elected.
Okay, Councillor, I'll let you come back on that quickly, and then we have to move
Yeah,
on.
well, I thank David for his proposition that I should be Secretary of State for Communities and Local Government. I take that as a vote of confidence. But
It's a lack
I
of
think
confidence,
I
I guess.
think it's,
fundamental
it's not a
point-
local vote of confidence.
the
it's
fundamental point
reality,
here
but it won't happen.
is we've got some difficult decisions to make in Kirklees as a whole. One of those is how do we maintain, actually improve the engagement and the involvement of our communities. What we're discussing here is a proposal that would actually do that, has the opportunity to do that and change the way Kirklees has done things from the past. Now, I welcome what Andrew and Kath have said, because they've been, you know, historically they've always put forward devolution proposals, not the same as this, but there's been common ground in the principles of devolution. And David seems to be converted to some degree, but that's not always been the Labour Party position. So if he's shifting that Labour Party position so that they're real devolution, I really welcome.
Who introduced area committees, Robert? Which party introduced area committees?
It was the all-party
Which party
administration.
introduced area
Oh,
committees?
it was
Original ones were introduced by the Labour Party, as was devolution to area committees.
Okay.
Who was the
All the devolution was...
sorry to correct you with
who
the
created local highways budgets? Who was the chair of
sorry to-
highways with local highways budgets?
and who was
Okay.
the cabinet member
Wasn't
who
it
introduced
Conservative?
area committees, and who was the leader? Myself, and who was the leader of the council at the time when it was introduced? It was Kath.
Okay, all right.
So we'll all agree it was
All
Kath who
right.
did it. That's fine.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to pull you apart because we're going to have to go on to our... we're going to have to go on to our next question now. Lively debate so far. If you have any comments regarding what's been discussed here so far, you can contact us by email on info@kirkleeslocaltv.com, and you can find us on Twitter by searching @KirkleesLocalTV. Now, on to our next question now. Despite 5 consecutive quarters of economic growth in the UK, youth unemployment is still very high. How do we go about creating jobs that are suited to this section of the population? Councillor Pinnock, how do we go about that?
First thing to say is that one of the tragedies of the recession has been the level of youth unemployment. I mean, in Kirklees it's been 20%. So the solutions to it are not easy, because if they were easy, we'd never have youth unemployment, and actually youth unemployment rose under the last Labour government, and that's because it's hard to deal with, because the whole of our economy is changing. So if I was going to say 2 things, I'd say, 1, we have to improve our school system so that children, young people leave it with the right skills and at the right level, and that they can move then into opportunities for developing those skills in colleges or apprenticeships, which are really important. And one of the best things that the Lib Dems have done in government, in my view, is huge increase in apprenticeships. So those are the 2 things we've got to do. Increase the number of apprenticeships. The council under David is doing that. That's really good. And then creating more jobs locally. and we can get on to that, I'm sure we will.
How do you handle the youth employment situation, Councillor Light?
Well, the first thing to recognise is that central government, local government, the state as a whole does not create jobs. It's businesses that create jobs. So it's creating the right environment for business to prosper and grow, which is a crucial thing that governments at all levels need to be able to do. And I think it's welcome to see that we've seen some good movement downwards in terms of youth unemployment and unemployment over recent months, and that's welcome. And I think that's showing that there are some strong areas of growth throughout the economy. And you mentioned the 5 quarters of growth, and it takes time to work through, and it takes time for us to feel it in Yorkshire and the north. But we are doing slowly, and I think that is the most crucial thing. And then it's about what can we do to help in preparing the skills, ensuring that we have the long-term actually right levels of skills in the economy. And the apprenticeships that have been developed over the last few years have been crucial to do that. And if you go back to one of those crazy things that have changed things for the worse in the 60s and 70s, it was the move away from apprenticeships and this idea that they were devalued in the eyes of young people. And I think that was really damaging to the long-term economy, that people thought that just getting a degree was the way forward, not that an apprenticeship in a trade was the way forward for employment. So I think changing that culture so that we get more apprenticeships, they are more valued by everybody, both within the education system and employers, is going to be the way forward for actually tackling youth employment, and actually making sure that those opportunities are broadened and are widened, so that when you actually leave school or leave education, then you have a range of opportunity paths to follow, because that's what the problem is at the moment, is there isn't a range of paths. And the only way by doing that at the end of the day will be having a strong, vibrant economy, an economy that is based on actually delivering actually profits for businesses, and actually cascading that down to a workforce.
All right. Councillor Cooper, the state, the government in general, does not create jobs. Do you concur with that?
Well, I'd like to start with the question. I mean, the question was a really good one. You know, why, despite five economic growth cycles, 5 quarters, why is it that we're not seeing progress for youth employment? And it begs a question. The question it begs is economic growth a good measure of social progress? And I think there's lots of reasons and lots of economists who would disagree that the economic growth necessarily is a good way of showing whether we're actually progressing as a society or not. And I think that's a good question to look at. In regard to the state, if you look at what's out there to be done, you know, look at the housing that we've got in the UK. Look at the very poor condition of it. Look at the appalling condition of energy efficiency of those properties. Look at all that work that needs doing in terms of reducing fuel poverty, reducing carbon emissions, putting more money back in people's pockets. There are millions of homes where work requires to be done, and requires to be done quickly. But that requires state intervention. That requires a role by the state. This government has been very hands-off with that, and as a result of that, we've had very little progress in improving the energy efficiency of our housing stock. And it would be great if we were actually doing something major. That would be a major programme which would actually help a lot of people, and we need to do that from the state level. The Green Deal has been an utter failure. The investment in the energy company obligation has been cut hugely to a pitiful level. These are the areas where young people could be inspired to be part of a massive programme which would help society as a whole. And that's what I would like to see. That's what.
Where's the money come from, Andrew?
Where's the money come from? Well, you find money for other things, don't you? The government finds money for HS2. The government finds money for Trident. There's 150 billion quid to start with.
So HS2
it's about
won't create any jobs, will it? Is that what
it won't help as many people as you would help on a programme such as this.
Over what period?
Over what period? You could do that over 10, 15 years. Well, yeah, you could.
And
that's 150.
You don't have the jobs.
That's 150. That's 150 billion quid, and there are more jobs and more people who would be helped by that, and that would achieve more social progress than getting to London half an hour quicker for a relatively small group of people.
It's about actually, it's making sure that the north is connected into the economies of the south and Europe and beyond, and that's what is holding us back at the moment. That is one of the issues. Is how you get your transport infrastructure is right is going to make that difference.
To suck money out of the north into the hothouse of London.
No, it's not. It's going to do the opposite way.
Okay, I'm going to bring Councillor Sheard in here.
I'm just trying to follow Robert's arguments, because he argues that government spending doesn't create jobs.
Absolutely.
Then he's arguing passionately for HS2.
No, it said that
Now,
government
where's HS2 money going to cut billions from the 40 odd billion that's going into HS2 and going up and up and up? That is central government funding.
And I guess it's going to subsidise a private company at the end of it.
So, I mean, this idea that the government spending doesn't create jobs is a bit of a nonsense. We put in a budget last year, this council put in a budget to put solar panels on many of our council houses. That is creating jobs, because they can't be fitted by someone working out of in India. The panels are actually fitted by somebody working in Kirklees. You can't transfer that out. I mean, the government was just recently was trying to get an American company to buy our biggest chemical company that would have shipped jobs out to America. I mean, they seem so keen to give jobs to everyone else and sell parts of our industry. They even sold our post office to us Arab princes and friends in the Far East.
Nuclear power.
We've got most of our energy companies are owned by foreign governments. The French government owns our energy companies. The railways are owned by French and German governments. Yet our government seems to be walked back from. But the original question, I think the question is not just creating youth jobs. I think the question is creating jobs altogether. Because I mean, some people, I mean, it's not. Yes, we've got, because if you create more jobs, then everyone gets more employment. And let's face it, I mean, how much we all want to, and I think it's right we increase the number of apprentices, but that's just to an iceberg. The tragedy we've got now is we've got long-established companies who have set up fake employment agencies to get around employment law, to put people on 0 hours contract. A lot of the youth are totally disenfranchised because they go on for jobs, they think of working with a company, then find out they've got to sign a contract with an agency who is slicing off the top amount, as large amount of their money, paying a minimum wage, and then the employment agency has taken the money away. We need to get back to firms that have got the guts to employ people, but treat them right. And I think that is a bigger problem for the youth, is that most of them are forced into this, being sold into slavery by employment agencies.
I think this. Sorry, just to come back on this. I think one of the issues about because Robert was basically doing the private sector is good, business should be the whole economy type approach, and I think one of the things I believe passionately in is a mixed economy where people have got different choices, where they've got the opportunity to work in the public sector, they've got the opportunity to work in the private sector. That's good for the private sector because it means the private sector's got to up its standards. It's got to make sure that it offers good standards in terms of contracts and working conditions. And so that's good for everybody. And so having that mixed economy is something we should all be pleased, proud of and wanting to promote.
And that's what we've had for generations, is a mixed economy, and we'll continue to have. The fundamental point there is actually where the jobs for the future are going to come. They're going to become by having good businesses, hopefully based locally, who will actually be profitable, do well and grow, and employ people, young people, hopefully in the future, and actually invest in those people because they value the staff. And that is crucial to the way we do things for the future. And I think David's taken us up a blind alley, because yes, there have always been problems with employment agencies and how they deal with things, but the main issue, the fundamental issue, is how do we continue to get more people in work. And bear in mind there are 30 million people in work in this country at the moment. For the first time ever, we've had so many people working. How do we keep that going? How do we get better?
When we're talking about figures, can
I just take us back to local? Because we're all talking about big economy, mixed economy, whatever. Actually, I'm concerned about young people locally. What are they going to do? How are they going to get into employment? Now, in one area, I will agree with Robert, which is that we need to enable, as a council, for more businesses to invest locally. And we know that one of the elements of that is allocating land for those businesses. And what I hope, certainly Liberal Democrats and the Labour group on the council proposed land for business development, which sadly was opposed by Robert and his group. So, you know, you've got to speak with truth about these things. It's no good saying we want businesses to develop and this, that and the other. If you don't enable businesses to do that by allocating them land with good transport links, it won't happen.
Okay.
So there's land, councils have land, they have property, they issue contracts, all of these things where we have influence, and those are the areas where we can actually say young people should be employed.
Yep.
These are things that go on, and to a certain extent it already happens here and there, but we could make more of that in terms of some of the things that we do.
I totally agree with that, actually. I think, you know, at the end of the day, what part of the public sector can have a bigger role in this area? Is it local government or central government? Then it's local government every day. Because actually local government has a greater understanding of the businesses in their communities.
But the issue is our capacity to be able to deliver things is being rapidly diminished because of the huge cuts that are happening.
Yep.
It's becoming harder and harder to have the people there to do the work to make these things occur and happen. If government was more imaginative, it would say, this is the area where we need to be investing in to stimulate local employment and to get good economic activity going.
But isn't that, I mean, the challenge for us, whoever forms the next government, is to actually get a government that is even more committed to localism than we've seen so far?
Well, I'd like one that's committed to localism.
Let's get rid of this word localism.
It's not real.
Because
it's
it's just rubbish. Nobody, and sadly my lot are part of the government, localism is...
You've heard it here first.
No, I've said it many times. I'm not bothered.
Yeah, but I'm an optimist. That's the problem.
They know central government believes in localism. Why? Because it means they have to let go of power and decision making and funding. And until we have proper and full devolution to local government, we could get rid of central government for most part, because what do? Except cause problems.
That's just what I propose for Kirklees.
So we need local government to be genuine local government, local decision making.
We're going in a way back to the last question in a sense, and I don't want to do that. I'm going to have to reel this in now because we have to keep moving. Thank you all for your contributions. If you have any comments regarding what's just been discussed with regards to youth employment, you can contact us by email on info@kirkleeslocaltv.com, and you can find us on Twitter by searching @Kirklees Local TV. Now, I'll move on to our third question of this evening. Keep A&E at HRI is a hot topic being discussed on the council and indeed across the borough. In anyone's mind, it should go without saying that accident and emergency services should be readily available, particularly to those with long-term illness and residents who are elderly or disabled. Yet it seems even now that more and more people find themselves going to King James Hospital in Leeds, Pinderfields and Elland for quite basic and routine surgeries and checkups. Health bosses have offered a variety of options. Councillor Cooper, why is this such a vital issue when it's such a vital service?
I suppose it's a vital issue because of funding, and funding is the key point here. And we were told that there would be no cuts in NHS funding. I think NHS would not be affected by the cuts because it was so vitally loved. Yet what we're actually seeing is an increasing privatisation of the National Health Service as we go forward. And the question is whether that is having an impact and reducing the benefits to local residents. The real concern here is that as a result of these changes that people are going to lose their lives when they don't necessarily have to because of the changes that are being done here. And of course, when you're talking about Huddersfield or Halifax, when that's being put forward, there's a real issue in here in terms of divide and rule, in terms of is it one or the other. And one of the things that we in the Green Party put on our leaflets is not just save Huddersfield accident emergency, but save Halifax accident emergency as well. We shouldn't have to see those sort of cuts occur, particularly when people's lives could be at threat. So my concern with this is that we've been presented with something that is supposed to be making things better. It's supposed to be an efficiency. And you often see this from public bodies. The council has been as guilty of it as anybody when a cut is being portrayed somehow or other as an improvement in service. So I'm proud that in Huddersfield, in Kirklees, that the Green Party campaigned on saving both services, not simply Huddersfield's. That's something that we were upfront about in our literature. I'm concerned about the increasing privatisation and chopping the choice cuts of the health service. That's a real concern, and I think as a council we ought to be pulling together to say we don't want cuts to either these or either our services or Calderdale's.
Councillor Sheard, what's your view on this issue?
Very close to the heart. Just a week last Friday, one of my constituents, sorry, but not a Newman one, demonstrated to me what he thought of my technique and took a great big chunk out of my arm. So last Friday, I was in A&E having X-rays, having a tetanus injection, and taking all everything else. So I sampled it firsthand, and I've got to say that the Dewsbury service was absolutely excellent. At A&E at Dewsbury, and extremely efficient. It was clean and got the service I wanted. It was a good service. The role, the thing that has changed over with the health service now is that the council has a duty to scrutinise decisions that the local health organisations make. We have a scrutiny committee, and on the Dewsbury and Pinderfield decisions, it was a joint scrutiny between Wakefield and Kirklees. On the Calderdale one, it will be a joint commission, no doubt, between Kirklees and Calderdale, scrutinising the decisions that have been made by the authority. Those then decisions, and we've got a right to make that representation to the Secretary of State about what we think about their proposals. Now, the people that I've got great praise for the people on those scrutiny commissioners who will actually look at all the details and decide whether they, as Andrew says, they are being made up purely economic terms or there is a rational argument from behind them. The bit about in your quote that I disagree with, when you say that the most salient option for residents would surely be no change. And I thought that the most salient option for residents was always striving for something better.
Mm-hmm.
It's not as if the service that we had was absolutely spot on. The big fear I've got is not necessary for A&E. The big fear that's hidden within all these changes, the new changes are extremely dependent on an ambulance service. Extremely dependent on an ambulance service. They've got paramedics that arrive at the scene to take you to the right place, and the more chance of saving your life if you get a paramedic to the scene. My fear is that if the ambulance service is plucked out and handed over to a private employer that is only wanting to make savings, then the savings will be the cuts to those paramedics. Because those are the crucial thing. If you have a big accident or you have a serious incident, the most crucial thing is how quickly your treatment can start. And that is totally and absolutely reliant on the ambulance service getting there quickly and having someone who knows what to do. When it comes down to specialisms, I've got to say that, yes, everyone would like to be dealt with locally. But I've got to admit, if I was having brain surgery, I'd rather have that done by someone who's done it 10 times over that week rather than someone who's opening an AIMS manual because he hasn't done it ever before. So I think that there is some truth in the fact that specialisms are getting more and more technical nowadays, and you need somebody with that expertise. But at the end of the day, we have got a duty, a real duty to the council. We have got to scrutinise these things. And we've got the right to put those recommendations to the Secretary of State. The Secretary of State will not agree with it. We didn't agree with our scrutiny position in Dewsbury and Pinderfields, but that is the process. So I think the way forward is for the new proposals that are now coming out for Huddersfield and Calderdale that keep changing daily from what I see. I haven't seen any real firm proposals yet. Should be adequately and properly scrutinised by a joint scrutiny commission of Calderdale and Kirklees councillors and individuals, and use the powers they've got to make recommendations to the Secretary of State.
Councillor Light.
Yeah, I agree with much.
Probably a Tory anyway.
I agree with much of what David said. Actually, I think the issues that we've got to face are actually we have got in this country is a continuing growth in demand for health services. So the question about is the status quo an option? No, it isn't, and it mustn't be, because we've got to get better. And change always ensures uncertainty, and that's understandable. So it's really important that us who are partners of the health services, but also us as public representatives, are doing that clear scrutiny, which actually makes sure that when change is put forward, there is proper backup, proper safeguards put in there to manage that change process right. I think the crucial thing in terms of how you move forward is twofold. The first is specialisms. At the end of the day, just like David said, I mean, if you need to go to hospital, you want to know you're getting the best care. When I was in A&E in Dewsbury, and they said we might need an intensive care bed for you. I didn't care where it was. All I cared was that there was going to be one. And I think that's the fundamental point that you've got to think about. So having specialisms is fine, but they should be shared around the region as well, so that they're not all concentrated in Leeds. So every area has its own specialism and it's recognised as that, as in many ways that has been done in the past. But then you come to your basics of A&E and that emergency care, and actually having a highly qualified A&E department at all your general hospitals, I think is a fundamental. So I'm opposed personally, and Conservatives are locally opposed to changes which would see Calderdale A&E close, or Huddersfield or Dewsbury A&E close, or be downgraded. We actually think that is fundamental to a general hospital based service.
That's local Conservatives, isn't it, Robert?
I said
That's
local Conservatives are
because
very
the Conservatives
clear.
don't make the decision.
I've made it very clear, David, as you know, that local Conservatives have been very passionate and very clear about our support over the last 15 years under successive governments of Labour and Conservative, that our view is just how I explained. Okay. I think the other point to pick up on is how you get to hospital in the first place. I think that is a fundamental, and I think there's a lot of need to look at how this is done and most effectively done, because actually when you're in that situation, when you need what do you need if you actually call the 999? You actually need a paramedic on the spot as fast as possible. So a speedy access, quick response from getting a paramedic on the scene is first important thing. And I think we can do that better. Some great examples how it's done at the moment, but actually it can be done better. Actually, the secondary point is then how do you transport that person once they've been stabilised to wherever they need to go. And I think that is the secondary point. And there's all sorts of detail within that. But there's real concern about the present ambulance service and how they manage that. And I think there's all sorts of things we need to look at this, but how we base people, how we get people able to actually respond as quickly as possible. Because the ambulance service is, to be blunt, has not got a good response time compared to the other emergency services. And I think that's a real big challenge for the future.
So will you condemn privatisation of ambulance services, Robert?
No, I think what we need to do
will you condemn,
we need to look at what
are the ambulance services for profit.
No, what we need actually, there are two issues.
No, you won't.
No, well, let me explain, David. There are two issues. There's quite clearly there is the need to get paramedics on the scene as soon as possible, and to my mind that should be everyone's key objective. There then comes a situation, if it's serious where you need continued treatment on the way to hospital, then that can be done. That needs paramedics on board with you. Sometimes that situation, you don't need that situation, you can just be transported. How that is done, I think we need to look at in terms of other bodies, like the fire service, playing a role in that, because I think it could be effectively done. And I think we need to be open to that, how we do that in the future.
Councillor Pinnock, I'll bring you in now.
I think the thing to make clear is we don't make the decision.
Right.
David's explained all local councillors can do is to queries, question, challenge, scrutinise is the word we use.
Private ambulance service, public ambulance service.
Look, we need to keep a full A&E in Huddersfield, it seems to me. I think we also need to just think a bit about what happens at A&E, because they're not all blue light incidents that are treated at A&E. A&E, actually, the majority of their work is in walking wounded, minor injuries at work or in sporting fields and so on. If you have a stroke or a heart attack in the north of the borough where we live, three of us, you don't get taken to our nearest A&E, and actually haven't been for a number of years. They will take you to the best place that will give you the best possible treatment, which is very likely to be in Leeds. And I think we'd all agree, actually, if you're a patient, you want to go where you're going to get the best possible opportunity, chance of survival. Yeah. So it's a bit more complicated than has been described. What I will agree with is the absolute importance of having skilled paramedics on the spot as soon as possible. And in my view, they should never be privatised.
I think that there is an issue here in terms of I agree about it's some of it's walking wounded, and if you're going to get bitten by a dog, don't do it on a Friday or Saturday night when people are kicking out from the pub, because you're going to have not very much of a fun time in A&E. The main issue between Huddersfield and Halifax, of course, is the main arterial road, which is through Ainley Top. And I've seen that, and many people have seen it many times, clogged up with traffic due to an incident or an accident or roadworks, whatever it happens to be. And that is the principal issue in terms of ensuring that there are two different centres there that people can get to. That's one of the main issues there, and why we need two different centres.
I think it's fundamental. If you need to get to A&E and you're in Tottenham, then going to Halifax is bad enough. If you're in Holmfirth, getting up to Huddersfield, Royal Infirmary is bad enough. You don't want to be going to further afield to Halifax.
No. It would seem the recurring theme here is not the most local, but the best available treatment. Is that something that you would concur with?
It's a combination of both, isn't it? For some things, yes. There's a combination of, yes, there's the walking wounded aspects, but there's also the issues where there's a real emergency where paramedics are not enough, that they're going to need further treatment there to be able to be able to deal with that, which is not the same as having a specialist brain surgeon or whatever it happens to be to deal with that. It's recognising those things that are in between walking wounded and major surgery.
I think it would be really helpful if we could have a sensible discussion in this country about what is a general hospital and what functions they do, and let's have a look at that in detail, and what is a specialist hospital and what they do, because I think the trouble is we're not having a sensible debate on health issues in this country at the moment, and we're suffering.
It wasn't helped, I guess, by somebody saying right at the very beginning of government that there will be no major reorganisation of the NHS during this government. And what are we having? We're having a major reorganisation of the health service.
Just get back to A&E. I mean, I think clinicians will tell you, but I think we've all said the same thing in a way. Clinicians will tell you that if you have a stroke, you're much better calling for an ambulance than trying to get to an A&E.
Correct.
Because you'll get someone who can deal with you quicker on the spot if you've got the right person there.
Yeah.
And I think that you're right about it's the old debate we have with the public. The public, they see headlines about numbers of hospital beds. Yet you talk to the clinicians and they want to reduce the number of hospital beds as an aim, because the longer you stay in hospital, the more chance you've got of dying. So there's what they're trying to do is to get people treated outside hospitals. So they want to reduce beds, but for more care. So I think that the question, as your question said, the real point is that we can't be standing still. We're wanting better care.
Well, we're going to move on to our next question now, but if you have anything to comment on with regards to the situation with our accident and emergency units, you can contact us by email on info@kirkleeslocaltv.com, and you can find us on Twitter by searching @Kirklees Local TV. On to a question focused on a major issue facing Kirklees arguably up until spring 2017, and that is the implementation of the proposed local plan. Various claims have been made about the period between the LDF going and the local plan coming in, including that it will be seen as an open season for developers, that developers will smell blood and pounce for greenfield sites which are cheaper to build on, and the overdevelopment of parts of Kirklees will take place amid inadequate infrastructure in terms of healthcare provision, schools, roads, transport services and drainage. What can be done, if anything, in the period that will arguably most worry residents between now and spring 2017? Councillor Sheard.
It's quite clear we need an LDF. We were wrong. We tried to come to a compromise. We all tried to come to a figure that, because we couldn't have an agreement on the numbers, we all tried to force downwards, hopefully to get an agreement. At the last minute, they decided not to agree with even that lower figure and come in with a lower one. We knew that we were told by our officers that an inspector that the inspector would turn this down because we didn't have the right number of houses, and that's the situation we've got into. But we do need to come up with a plan. The problem we've had is that the Conservatives told us that they'd had the ear of the minister and he would allow us to have less and less houses. We didn't need to build any. And we missed a fundamental point. What we're not talking about, unless there's a Malthusian crisis or some massive endemic and half the population dies, then the population is still growing. So at some stage, we will need to build houses for people. So what we're really saying by reducing the numbers that we put in now, is we're saying we're washing our hands of it, and we're going to force our children to make that decision.
Okay. Yeah.
So we should rationally take a decision about it. If we want to direct where houses go and how that development is phased and how it is done, we need an LDF. We tried to reach a compromise. Compromise didn't work because we ended up with a solution which the inspector said, through code, he hadn't got the guts to come out and say what he really meant, but what we all knew what he was saying was, you haven't got enough houses. Remember, his coded word was, you didn't cooperate with Leeds. Yet Leeds got theirs passed. And to me, it takes two people to cooperate.
Yeah.
So how did we not cooperate with Leeds if they got theirs passed and we didn't?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's all down to the number of houses that we need to plan for.
Okay.
And remember, it's not a matter of that if they'll be built, it's when they'll be built. And we're just passing the problem on to our children if we don't take that decision.
All right, Councillor Pinnock.
I think one of the worst things that has happened in Kirklees Council is that we have not been able to agree a local development plan, land allocation for houses and business. Certainly we propose actually the highest number of houses in the plan. And I recognised at the time that was likely not to pass the scrutiny of the government inspector. But, as David has explained, it's got to be a wider decision than two parties.
Yeah.
And, you know, perhaps Robert will be able to explain why he thought we could have 16,000 houses over 20 years when everybody else, his own government inspector, is talking about 32,000. You know, so
it's not just his government.
It's yours as well, is it?
No, it's yours.
No, it's it. No, certainly not.
It's the Queen's.
It's
It's the Queen's government.
I'll have to point
I
out
say so.
who was the other party who would refuse to support a decent number of houses
I'll
being
happily
built.
talk about that when
But-
it's my turn.
But the fact is, because we don't have true local decision making, the government tells you how many houses you have to put into your plan. That's the bottom line. Local Conservative MPs went round the borough telling people, actually, don't worry, we got the ear of Pickles and Co in government. They'll allow you to have just a minimum number, and clearly that was not the case. And the consequences are enormous. It means that greenfields, which should not now be being built on, can be built on actually without any further discussion.
Okay.
It's the biggest challenge, I think, facing the council, because people do not like seeing greenfields being built on, especially when most of our areas have huge areas of brownfield land.
Yeah. Councillor Cooper, it's your turn.
Thank you. Well, I guess the point, there's a number of points to make. I guess one of them is that there's loads of permission already out there in terms of land that's available to develop. Right in the centre of the Newsham ward, we've got a brownfield site being lying there for ages, got planning permission, ready to go. So there isn't necessarily a shortage of land. What there is a shortage of is willingness by developers to take on those sites and to develop them. So that's one issue to bring up. I guess when looking back at the history of this, I think all parties on the council are culpable. David's right, it wasn't about you to cooperate, it was about the numbers. And we all played a game of limbo regarding the numbers to see how low you could go in terms of trying to show that you were going to protect greenfield and greenbelt land. So that really went on. The line that the Green Party took was that we were calling the government's bluff, because we always thought it was a bluff that we had local control over the figures that we put, and it was always a lie that we had some sort of control over that. The real issue we've got now is to recognise that period has passed, and that we all now have a responsibility and a duty jointly as politicians, and that to come up with a plan that we don't necessarily like, but is something that will pass, and that's something that that parties on this council should get together and have a mature, responsible approach to dealing with. And it's difficult because I'm not going to like it. I remember the Conservative chair of the Planning and Highways Committee is a question, her last question, Councillor Christine Smith, it was a question from Robert, and about what was going to happen in the LDF in future, and she said, we are going to have to use greenbelt land to develop on whether you like it or not. And I was amazed by that statement. I was amazed by that statement by Christine Smith, but it does indicate the fact that that government is placing some very difficult choices in front of us, and I think one thing we've got to do is see how we actually approach that issue. If somebody wants to go off and play some sort of game that because they're not part of the administration, well, you know, that's up to them. But they're not, if you like, helping the greater good, the common good on this. So we've got to do that. We have a duty to cooperate with each other on this.
Yeah. Councillor Light, I'll let you answer.
Yeah, and let me to be straight and up front, as Conservatives, local Conservatives, we don't like it, and we don't think it's right. And I suppose Andrew has to, now he's part of the council administration, he's got to
I'm not.
be part of a compromise solution.
I'm not part of the council administration. Am I?
Time will tell. Watch this space for next week.
Well, I'm expecting a cabinet place. What do you think? Can I have a cabinet place?
The crucial point is you've got to look at the big
I don't want
picture
one.
here. Big picture here, if I can get a word in, is, and probably actually one thing the coalition government should have done, it abolished a lot of things around planning. What it should have done is taken a long look at the local development framework, which was initiated by the Labour government, and said, this is a nightmare. You know, can we get something to make that more effective? Because the process is what has killed many councils. Not actually just what the detail of, actually the process has been so bad to getting decisions. And I think that would be, I'm sure, government looking back on that would have said, well, maybe we should have done something different on this. That's the first point. The second point is fundamentally, I actually do believe that it's a local decision and should be. And I don't care who the government is, they shouldn't be enforcing figures. I said that about Gordon Brown when he said I want 3 million houses built, which meant 40,000 for Kirklees. I said that at the time, I'll say that now. I mean, I do think it's a fundamental decision that local authorities should make, not that central government should make. Sadly, I think that's going to be a view that if you look at the statements from certainly the three major parties, is not really recognised greatly. In terms of what has been said, I think there's some important points about how, when you're looking at land for use, how you use brownfield development. And I think Andrew was absolutely right on that point. You know, there's a lot of brownfield development, and the council is not doing enough to ensure that is developed. And I think we need to by allocating large chunks of greenbelt land, what you are doing is condemning that land to stay undeveloped for a number of years. And I think
you need to explain. You really need to explain. Yeah,
it's a fantasy world.
It is a fantasy world.
I'm sorry. We haven't allocated the land. Your government has.
All these brownfield sites are already allocated, Robert.
But they have been built, haven't they?
No,
but you've already explained.
You're the private sector. You're the one who wants to private sector.
You're the one who.
You're the capitalist among us here.
For goodness sake.
They are not being built. Are they not? You know, tell me I'm wrong.
The developers want greenfield sites.
Sorry, but I've got any friends who are developers. You might have. I mean, but
All right.
the point is, to me, is really important. Is if you actually allocate and make available more greenfield land, then less brownfield land will get developed. And I think that's clearly because the economics are there. Because at the end of the day, it costs more money to develop brownfield land.
With a brownfield land, that is my ward.
If I can get a word in edgeways,
Okay.
if I can get a word in edgeways, David.
Well, it's going to have to be quickly. I'm
I
sorry.
think the most important thing is that we do need a plan, because actually, we're in a mess as a council on this matter. There's 12 months after being told that we're in a mess. What has the Labour administration done? Well, nothing, because nothing has come forward yet.
Can I
And
make-
actually, there's a real onus
No, you
on
were
the
gonna
political
talk pickles out
administration
for
of
us.
this council.
You
to
said
come
to the
for-
council you were going to go and get pickles to tell us we could build the house around.
All right.
You haven't delivered.
All right.
He's told you to build more,
I'm,
not
gonna have to,
less.
I'm sorry. I'm going
There's
to
a-
have
Do
there's
you
to.
just
like to
one
us,
point.
Robert?
Andy,
Okay,
that's
just
all.
make that.
You've done nothing.
Hang on a
David.
second.
When
No.
Kath asked
Hang
you
on.
for 3 months ago, Kath asked you,
No.
when are you going to come forward with a plan? And you know what she's had? Silence. since.
Okay, we're going to have to tie this off. Councillor Cooper, one last point really quickly,
on
please.
this, I guess the question is that all four of us need to answer is what are we all collectively going to do different when we're looking at the new plan that we didn't do before? What have we recognised through the process that we've been through that is going to make each of us behave in a different way to what we did before? Do we recognise that there is a changed situation?
A more general question. What's your overall vision and ambition for Kirklees in terms of where you would like it to be in 5 to 10 years' time? How do you want to see treatment towards various communities develop? Councillor Pinnock, take you first on this one.
Oh, right. Okay, that's a really wide question, isn't it? I want people in Kirklees to have more opportunities, better paid jobs, more skills, so that we can become as an area as we were 100 years ago, which was the centre of excellence for manufacturing, and we need to, through links with the university, become a centre of excellence again. But that means and be global in our reach for the businesses that are created here.
Okay.
What we also need to do, though, is to create a much more inclusive society and communities than we currently have. And that has always been one of my, when I was leader of the council, one of the touchstones, if you like, of what we did. And sadly, when I was leader of the council, we had the rise of the racist, fascist British National Party, which caused huge divisions within our communities, and in some cases violent divisions in our communities. And we've got to work constantly, being mindful of what we say and how we say it, and how we bring people in to the wider civic society.
Okay.
And that's for all communities. One of the unmet ambitions I've had is that we, as a council, elect somebody from African heritage onto the council.
Sure.
And equally, I think we ought to ensure that we have, as we have had in the past, people with disabilities on the council.
Okay.
And people from the LGBT community on the council, as we have in the past, to bring those different experiences into our decision making, because without that, our decision making is poorer.
Okay, Councillor Light, just a few sentences, please. I'm just wary of time. I know it's a wide question, but we're going to run over if we...
In summary, a collection of diverse communities at ease with themselves, I think, is a crucial thing, and that we actually have a prosperous society which is getting prosperous year on year. That is, to me, is the challenge, and we create a living environment that actually looks after the importance of the environment and that living environment in terms of the way we live, but also the land we have and the way we use it.
Okay. Councillor Cooper?
I guess the thing that I think characterises society that we have at the moment is insecurity. People are insecure about possibly their home, they're insecure about their job, all those sort of things which have a knock-on effect on the rest of society. And so one of the things that we're really wanting to do is make sure that 5-10 years in the future, people feel they're living in a more secure place. Because if they don't feel secure, if they feel under threat, they feel a job, they feel their home, whatever is a threat, then that leads to other consequences. We've seen the rise of the far right coming along. We've seen the rise of parties who are full of closet racists, and some of them are closet racists. They're the way out there. And so I think we've got to make sure that people don't use the excuses of insecurity as a way of moving themselves forward. So we have a responsibility to create a more secure Kirklees and hopefully a more secure country.
All right, Councillor Sheard.
I know it sounds actually extremely glib, but I mean, all I can say, the only ambition I think that you can really have is to make the place better
Okay.
in all aspects.
All right. Okay. Well, on that relatively light question, we draw this evening's debate to a close. And if you have any comments regarding anything that's being discussed here tonight in this high quality and heated debate, you can send your comments in via email on info@kirkleeslocaltv.com, and you can find us on Twitter by searching @Kirklees Local TV. A big thank you to all my guests here tonight. It's been a pleasure to hear all your views, and I'm sure the residents will appreciate it as well. Thank you for watching, and from all of us here, goodbye, and we look forward to you tuning in again soon. Bye-bye.